right, good morning, everybody. My name is Colin. I help create content for Marilyn and Sarah. And for those of you who are curious, yes, this mustache was inspired by 1970s Pastor Pat. If you haven't seen that picture, it's glorious. He needs to bring it back, and he keeps resisting me. But you know what, Redeemers? He can't stop all of you if you held him down and shaved him. All right, do it for me. We need you. For those of you who are joining us online, thank you so much for joining us for our midweek encouragement. But today, I want to talk about really what happens when you sit down at your desk at work, or if you stand, you have that kind of job. What do people see if they were to sit right where you sit? Because if you sit at my desk, you will see things that I'm working on. You'll see reminders that I have to always focus on the cross. You may see that at the top of my board behind my desk, I have one word at the top which says able. And the reason why I have that at the top of my desk is because it reminds me of a great prayer in Ephesians 3 where it says, "To him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine." It's this reminder that when I'm dealing with God, it's not up to what I can come up with. It's on what he can come up with. I also have an inspirational quote from the late, great vaudeville actor Will Rogers, which says, "Never miss a chance to shut up," which is great advice for a guy like me. I have pictures of my kids, or at least what they looked like 2 months ago, because they're growing so fast. I've got pictures of my lovely wife, of us together. And I noticed recently that my favorite pictures of my wife are us in incredibly hard seasons where she chose to smile with me anyway. It means a lot to me. And somewhere right down at the bottom is a tiny little font, and it says in tiny letters, "How do we know what happens to us isn't good?" The reason why I have that there is because it reminds me of a great story from a woman named Amy Hempel. It's called The Man in Bogota. Bogota is a place in Colombia. And this is a story that she tells. She speaks of someone who's down on the ground, and she looks up, and she sees someone who's on a ledge, and they're about to jump, and nothing's helping. And this person imagines, I am the one who has to go up and talk this person off the ledge. What would I say? What would you say to a person in that situation? So this person goes up, and this is the story that they tell. There was a man in Bogota. He was a rich man, and he was kidnapped and held for ransom. And this was not like the movies where in 24 hours you could call up the bank, and then suddenly you have a briefcase full of money, and then everything goes back to normal. It took months to get the money. And during this time, the captors had to keep this rich man alive because he was in bad health. They made him quit smoking. They made him change his diet. They made him exercise. And when he finally came back home after months in captivity, the doctors looked him over, and what they say to him is this: "You were in the best health you've ever been. This kidnapping is the best thing that ever happened to you." And I wonder if this woman on the ledge could think what that man in Bogota thought, which is this: how do we know what happens to us is not good? Now, you may be going, Colin, I've lived some life. There's plenty of things that happened to me that were bad. It's very simple. They were bad. They go in the bad box, and there they will stay all my days. You know why? Because they were bad. Fair point. I get that. But it also seems to me that at times, Jesus would ask questions to people that were not obvious. Maybe you've read in John chapter 5 when he walks up to a guy who's been sick for 37 years. He's been sitting, waiting by a pool where people supposedly get healed for 37 years. And what does Jesus ask this guy who's been sick for 37 years? He asks this guy, "Do you want to get well?" Yes! Obviously, yes. Right? Maybe. Because it turns out that if you've been sick or hurting or wounded for a long time, you don't even know how to live healthy anymore. You've got used to being down. You've gotten good at being down. And it's hard to learn to live healthy again. The answer is not as obvious as you think. Or you can read another part where Jesus is crossing over the lake with his disciples. They're all in the boat. These are trained fishermen, and the waves are bashing against the boat. And Jesus is in the back doing what? Taking a nap. And these trained fishermen, they run up to him as the water's spilling over, and they go, "Don't you care? We're going to drown," which is interesting. They seem to think that he can do something. But you can at least not be asleep, Lord. And Jesus, this is how I imagine it anyway, kind of wakes up, rebukes the storm, like, "Ah." And the chaos goes calm. And they all freak out, like, what is going on? Even the wind and waves obey him. But he asks them, "Why were you afraid? Do you still have so little faith?" Why were we afraid? I don't know. Death coming in on us. Waves, we know. A rough storm. It looked bad. What do you mean? Well, if the God of the universe is with you, why are you afraid? Really? Every season of your life, if God is with you, why do you fear? It's probably because on some level, I just don't trust you there yet, God. And my call to maturity in this life is that I hope the yet, where I don't yet trust God, gets shorter and shorter. And maybe at times I'll actually just trust him in advance, because I don't know what's actually good for me at times. Do you? You think you do. I think I'll date that person, it'll work. Whoops, that was a mistake. I think I'll move here and it'll work. Maybe not so much. I think I'll do this with my career path. No, you won't. All kinds of things can happen. And you can try your hardest, but there's just things that you can't see. Things that you can't know. And at times, you don't even know what's good for you. And neither do I. If you want to see a great example of this, I encourage you to read the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. It goes from Genesis 37 through Genesis 50. And the reason why it's so good is because you get to see him be faithful in every season. When things are good, he's faithful. When things are hard, he's faithful. All of his days, he's looking to the Lord for his goodness. Now, we are going to have a pop quiz after I do this recap, so pay close attention. In the story of Joseph, here's how it begins. Genesis 37, he is 17 years old, and he's driving his family nuts. He drives his family nuts in part because his father Jacob, who's a character in and of himself, you can read about him earlier on in the book of Genesis, favors Joseph more than his brothers, and it makes him jealous. And then he also starts having prophetic dreams, God-given dreams with God-given interpretation. And as he shares these dreams, let's just say he's not very coy about it. He runs up and he goes, "Listen to this dream I had," and then proceeds to tell them about how they will bow down to him one day. And they hate him all the more. And so his brothers sell him into slavery. They beat him up and they throw him in a pit first, but they sell him into slavery. They come back and they tell their dad that Joseph is dead. And Joseph goes down a very hard path. We read in Genesis 39 that he's working for a high-ranking Egyptian official named Potiphar. And in Potiphar's house, he starts to rise up. Things start to go well again. But then Potiphar's wife notices him, and she tries to seduce him. And Joseph has this amazing moment of faith where he's like, how can I do this wicked thing? How can I sin against God? And he runs away. He flees from sexual immorality. You know that's what you're supposed to do, right? I never want to do that. With any sin, I always want to say, "No, thank you, I'm very good." And I very politely tuck in my chair and walk away casually. It's not how it works. You have to flee from sexual immorality because it's against your own body and it'll mess you up, okay? That's what he does. He runs, he flees. And what does he get for this wonderful, faithful moment? He gets falsely accused and thrown in prison. Okay. He starts to work his way back up in the prison. There are people that he interprets dreams for. One of them is a cupbearer to Pharaoh, the ruler over all of Egypt. And as this cupbearer goes out with an interpretation from this dream that God gave to Joseph, and he told this man, he goes, hey, don't forget me. And the cupbearer goes, I won't, and then forgets him. I'm trying to be faithful, Lord. I'm really trying. What is it about that? You ever had those times in your life where you're trying to be so faithful to the things of God, and it just feels like you get kicked in the teeth more? And then you feel like you're coming back a little bit, and whoa, you get knocked down again. It shouldn't be a surprise. I've read in John 15 where Jesus talks about how we abide in him, and if with him we grow fruit. And you know what he says in there? He says fairly early on that even if you're fruitful, there will be times where you are pruned so that you can be even more fruitful in the future. I have to be honest. Being pruned after you've been faithful, it's so painful. It's so confusing. You forget it. You're like, what? Everything was going great, God. Why? Why does this have to happen? And I'm not even sure that I've seen the fruitful part that I want to see in the future. I'm not sure I've got to that more fruitful part yet. So I understand Joseph's pain in this moment. But 2 years later, this cupbearer remembers him. You know why? Because Pharaoh is having a temper tantrum about a dream he can't understand, about skinny cows eating fat cows. He's like, what is this? And no one knows. And suddenly Joseph is brought up. They kind of hose him down, change his clothes. And Pharaoh goes, hey, I've heard you can interpret dreams. He's like, I can't. But God will give you the answer. He puts it all on God. Over time, he's become more humble. He's not that 17-year-old kid who's like bragging in front of his brothers anymore. And Joseph interprets the dreams. There's going to be 7 good years. But after this, there's going to be 7 hard years of famine. And we need to store and save during this time if we're going to make it through. I think we all know that, right? Like if things are good with you with the Lord, make sure you are saving the good things that he's given you, even as a memory, maybe in a savings account. Why not? And try to make it through because the hard times will come, right? The storms of life do in fact come again. And sure enough, Pharaoh hears this, and he says, great, you are now second in command. And in one quick moment, he goes from prisoner to prince over all of Egypt. And during the hard times, get this, during the hard times when the famine comes, that's when his family comes to see him. You know why? Because all of Egypt comes to see Joseph during this time. And they say to him, you have saved our lives, because he's got grain that he saved because of what God told him to do. And over a long, drawn-out process, Joseph has restoration with his family. Even his father Jacob comes and blesses his sons and grandsons. And then Joseph dies at 110 years of age, a faithful and just man. Got it? All right. Pop quiz time. In that entire story, in those 13 chapters, there is one chapter, just one, where God says 4 times that he is with Joseph in one chapter alone. Nowhere else in that story. Now, if you're like me, you're going, oh, it's got to be the time when everything's good. It's got to be the time when Joseph is finally brought out of prison, he's cleaned up, he's finally made the prince, and everything's great, right? Like life's finally going good? Nope. All right, maybe it's the part where he finally forgives his brothers, because forgiveness is good. We know that, right? Christians, we know forgiveness is good. Nope. Is it at the end of his life? I guess it's time to go see the Lord now, so God is with you. Okay, please don't tell me that it's at the very beginning before everything went wrong. Because you know there's a lot of people who think like that, right? Like my life was good, and then it got derailed somewhere along the way, and it's never going to be good again. I guess God has left me. No. It is actually here in Genesis 39 when everything's going wrong. So this is Joseph when he's with Potiphar, right after he's been sold into slavery. It says the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. There's one. When his master saw that, too, the Lord was with him, and the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. And later on in the story, after he's been thrown in prison, what does it say? But while Joseph was there in prison, 3, the Lord is with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Friends, I have to tell you that you may be incredibly tempted to believe that when you face the hard things in your life that God has abandoned you. It's not the case. Those are the times where you can actually know the Lord all the more deeply. How will you ever know God's faithfulness unless you ever go through anything that's hard? How will you ever know God as your provider if you've never been broke? How will you ever know God as your healer if you've never been sick? The ways that God is the most precious to me are in all the ways that I have stumbled and fallen and I couldn't correct my life again. And he had to come in and make it good. And I'm so glad that I've learned to rely on him, just like Joseph learned to. But there's more than that, right? The question today is, how do we know what happens to us isn't good? Because it's one thing if God comes in and he does all things for the good of those who love him. We say that in Romans, right? We kind of know it and we kind of believe it and we sort of get glimpses of it. But it is actually in reading the very end of the story of Joseph that we see it. Genesis 50, the very last chapter, Joseph is hanging out and his dad dies. And it's a really hard time and they bury him. And suddenly all of his brothers go, what if Joseph didn't really forgive us? What if he's going to get mad at us now that dad is gone? And so they write him, honestly, this really manipulative letter. They say things like, remember, we are God's servants. Ooh, remember, forgiveness is good. And Joseph weeps, in part because they think so little of him. But this is what he says to them. He says to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. This is in reference to having all the grain in the famine. But I want to point something out. There's a good chance in your Bible that certain words are italicized, and they are italicized because it's where words have been added to make things more grammatically clear. And so this word, but, is added. What happens here in this moment is Joseph is actually talking about two separate statements. And it matters. This shows up in the original language. The first statement is this, is you, my brothers, you actually intended to harm me. I don't have to pretend it was good. I don't have to pretend that this is what I wanted. I don't have to pretend that this is the life I wanted for myself. In fact, even when Joseph is doing well in the 7 years that are good, he has a family and he names his kids after the fact that God has been good to him regardless. One of his kids is named after the fact that God has allowed him to be fruitful in his land of suffering. You do not have to pretend that your life is the way you want it to be. You can acknowledge that people have intended you harm and that it was wrong. However, there's a second statement, which is God intended it for good. And I encourage you, go back and read the entire story of Joseph with that vision. That at every level, God is intending it for good, not just for all the people out there, not just for his brothers, but even for Joseph. How do you know what happens to you isn't good? One more thing before we wrap up. Do any of you know what stress wood is? Stress wood is what trees grow to keep them standing. So you see, because for a little while there in the 90s, we were trying to build certain vivariums or biospheres that were entirely encased ecological systems where you could have plants and water and air and everything else. And the idea was that if we got it right, we could shoot these biospheres into space, pew, and we could go colonize a new land that we haven't screwed up yet. Let's go visit brand new planets. Hopefully it's better next time. That was the thought. But there were so many failure points in these biospheres. And one of the most notable ones was always the trees. The reason was this, is these trees would grow up a little bit, and under their own weight, they would just kind of fall over. Pew! And they kept trying to figure out, why is this happening? And it's because they did not have stress wood. What happens if you are not in a nice encased bubble is that wind will blow on you. It'll almost blow that little tree right over. But over time, the tree will get stronger. It develops stress wood. In those cracks, the light is able to get in more, and the tree actually starts to bend more toward the light because of those cracks. And the tree gets stronger. But if you don't have any stress wood in your life, you just fall over under your own weight. Haven't you seen this? You can absolutely blow up your life just as much from prosperity as you can from adversity. You need stress wood. You, dear little tree, even if you got bigger, need that stress wood. And so my final encouragement to you today is to lay the things that really wound you before the Lord and say, would you please show me, just like Joseph, how this is used for good? Not just to make me more fruitful, not just for your glory, but even for me. Because, Lord, I need to know your love even in that dark, deep place. And may you know, just like Joseph, that in your darkest times, God is with you. Have a great day.